So, with the leaks that have recently come out for the Rise of Skywalker, I thought I'd put in my 2 cents about the whole fiasco. There are 5 things in particular in relation to the leaks that I want to talk about that are EU related, and why Disney doesn't understand the EU's lore like they think they do, and why this in turn makes the expanded universe look ridiculous. I realized in my previous video I stated that Disney wants to destroy old Star Wars as we know it, the originals, the prequels, and the expanded universe, and this is true. One caveat I should have added is this. What they don't want to destroy or ignore, they want to reshape and mold until it is a bastardized version they can claim as their own. The first thing I want to talk about is Palpatine's return. I realize there are many of you out there that are positively furious that Palpatine is still alive in any way, as this invalidates Vader slash Anakin's redemption, right? Well, I am here to say that it's not really simple as all that. Now, before you get your pitchforks out and go on a people's crusade, let me explain further about what I mean. In the expanded universe, Palpatine comes back via one of his many clones he had commissioned to be made in the untimely event of his death. Palpatine was a very prideful individual, bordering on hubris. He never intended on dying, and in fact, he considered death to be below him. He disregarded the infamous rule of two, and never intended for anyone to surpass him as master. That's why his only legitimate apprentices were a cripple in an armored life support suit, an old man who was past his prime, and a Zabrak who, while he may have had strong lightsaber prowess, was pretty weak when it came to the actual force. He intended to live forever as Supreme Emperor of the Galaxy, while relying on servants who were weaker in the Force than him to do his bidding. It's very likely that if Luke had been just as conflicted as his father, and swore his loyalty as Palpatine's apprentice, that Palpatine would have most definitely orchestrated something to make Luke not as strong as he could have been. Someone like Palpatine doesn't want an apprentice that could potentially one day overthrow him. While all Sith apprentices and masters throughout history never intended to be weak enough to die to their respective apprentice slash master, they also understood that it was an inevitability that one day either their apprentice will try to kill them, or that their master will try to replace them with a new apprentice once they lose their usefulness. And both master and apprentice wholeheartedly accepted this as a reality of being a Sith. This reality and the massive paranoia that came with it is why all the incarnations of the Sith Order before the Rule of Two were so fucking chaotic, especially after a Dark Lord died, which resulted in an absolutely titanic power vacuum. The Rule of Two, which was brought into concept by Darth Revan and then fully enacted by Darth Bane, was meant to not only maximize the power of the dark side, as it was theorized by Bane himself that the dark side was not infinite in its power and could only handle so many individuals tapping into it, but to also limit the chaos that ultimately weakened the Sith whenever there was a huge power vacuum. Palpatine differed from past Sith in that he didn't accept this reality of being a Sith. He thought there was no need to continue the Sith line that had begun with Bane. Knowing all of this, it really isn't that surprising that he had countermeasures in place in case he ended up dying. Now, onto whether this truly invalidates Anakin's legacy. Well, not really. I know, give me a chance, okay? Palpatine's return in the EU and Palpatine's return in the sequels are two completely different contexts. Palpatine's return in the EU doesn't invalidate Anakin's sacrifice, while Palpatine's return in the sequels 100% does. First, let's cover what Anakin's true legacy was. It was saving his son, the new hope for the galaxy and the Jedi Order, from the Emperor. Love is what led Anakin down the dark path, and it's also what ended up ultimately saving him from the dark path.
The Jedi, with their damnable sense of overcaution, would tell you love is something to avoid. Thankfully, anyone who's even partially alive knows that's not true. Love doesn't lead to the dark side. Passion can lead to rage and fear and can be controlled, but passion is not the same thing as love. Controlling your passions while being in love, that's what they should teach you to beware. But love itself will save you, not condemn you. Love causes pain, certainly. Inevitably, love is going to lead to as much sorrow and regret as it does joy. I suppose there are perfect, eternal loves out there, but I haven't seen any. And how do you deal with the bad part of love is what determines your character, what determines the dark side's hold over you. Bah, a life without risk is boring. Is that how you want to live? You want love, you've got to fight for it.
The Emperor's death and the subsequent destabilization of the Empire as a political entity, while it was also a pretty important thing he was responsible for, was not his main act of redemption. As a consequence of all of this, a new political entity arises from the chaos of the Galactic Civil War, the New Republic. Now, that doesn't mean the New Republic doesn't face its trials, such as this beautiful man, but ultimately it becomes dominant power in the galaxy. The Empire becomes fractured into tiny pieces. Think of the Sengoku Jidai period in Japan, but on a galactic scale. Each Moff, Governor, and Admiral becoming a warlord vying for control of the Empire. They do get close to uniting under this beautiful man, but go right back to their petty squabbles once he goes away. Luke becomes the Yoda for future Jedi, becoming the Grand Master of their order and guiding Jedi down the path of the light. Luke abandons many of the traditions that made the old Jedi Order stagnant, like allowing attachments, and letting anyone who was Force sensitive to train to be a Jedi, whether they were 10 or 30. It wasn't all sunshines and bunnies, obviously, but the Emperor's return didn't diminish the political instability and eventual collapse of the Empire that his original death caused. Nor did it stop the rise of the New Republic, and in fact, he didn't even return for very long, and the Imperial remnants went right back to fighting each other after his death. The Emperor's return in the sequels is completely different. For one thing, it seems it was really him who was orchestrating everything from the shadows, which means that the Emperor played Luke and Vader for absolute fools in the Return of the Jedi. Luke became a feckless craven of an old man and died from overexerting himself by projecting his image across the galaxy, meaning he and Leia were never the New Hope. All the trials and tribulations that Obi-Wan and Yoda went through was for nothing. Luke and Leia were just schmucks who raised another Vader and allowed the Empire 2.0, which was apparently backed by Palpatine this whole time, to come into power and take over the New Republic. Meaning Vader redeemed himself for an incompetent oaf who apparently didn't learn anything from his journey from episodes 4 to 6, and was a complete failure through and through. Which means saving his son meant absolutely nothing. And if anything, saving his son makes things worse for the galaxy as he causes Ben Solo to fall to the dark side. The sequel trilogy had already invalidated Anakin's legacy and redemption the moment Rey handed Luke his father's lightsaber and Luke tosses it off the cliff in nonchalance. The Emperor being the mastermind and never really being dead, and in fact taking over the galaxy once again, is just to add insult to injury. The EU knew how to bring the Emperor back without pissing on everything, and the sequel trilogy evidently does not. Secondly, I want to talk about that leaked photo of the Emperor shooting lightning into the sky like a fucking madman. Apparently, if the rumors are true for that, he does this right after Rey taunts Palpatine, saying something to the effect of, "You can't stop all of us," as Rey and Kylo at this point have united multiple fleets of ships to attack the Emperor. Palpatine responds by shooting fucking lightning into space, and destroying ships left and right. Okay, just fuck right off with this bullshit, Disney. For those who don't know, in Dark Empire, which is the same series of comics where Palpatine comes back, the Emperor causes a force storm in space, which destroys a number of huge ships within the New Republic fleet. But once again, the context is completely different. Palpatine doesn't just lift his hand and blow up some ships with his normal force lightning. In the EU, there were multiple forms of force storm. The one that Palpatine used was essentially a huge fucking hyperspace wormhole that could destroy whole fleets of ships or devastate the surfaces of entire planets. Using this power was extremely risky, however, and even masters of the dark side have difficulty controlling them once they unleash this power on their foes. And in fact, Palpatine's overconfidence with this ability is what ultimately leads to his peril. Disney's bastardized version of this is simply fucking appalling, and goes to show that Disney Star Wars on its best day couldn't lace the expanded universe's boots on its worst. Then we move on to another what the fuck, because apparently Rey and friends need to find a Sith dagger in order to kill Palpatine. Yes, apparently Sith are now paranormal creatures like werewolves and vampires. It takes special weaponry to kill them, except that even disregarding the EU, that's bullshit. What happened to Count Dooku then? Is he just levitating up in space above Coruscant like some headless horseman fuck, waiting for someone to kill him with a special dagger? Maul fought Obi-Wan and Rebels on Tatooine. Is he just sitting around chilling with some sand people and smoking hashish with a fucking huge gash in his chest? Do we even want to speculate on Vader? Then, of course, we move on to other bullshit, and apparently C-3PO has to translate some MacGuffin plot device. The only problem is, it's the Sith language, which C-3PO cannot translate, as it is ancient. And so they have to effectively destroy 3PO's mind in order for him to be able to translate it. Because in a futuristic setting like Star Wars, there's literally no other way people can translate an ancient language. I don't really have a problem with the part about 3PO not being able to translate ancient Sith, as even in the expanded universe, it would be unlikely that he would be able to translate said language. My problem is the inconsistent handling of the expanded universe lore. They retcon it in its entirety, except when they want to bring in certain elements to bastardize and pervert, and when they don't bastardize, they introduce into their universe as incomplete. Go on Wikipedia, for instance, and type in Sith language. If you look at the canon section, it's literally just a footnote about how a long time ago the Sith used to speak this language. Go into the expanded universe section, fuck off, I'll never refer to it as legends, and you get a full history about the language, about how the Sith used to be a species with a unique culture. From there, you can learn about how dark Jedi exiles arrived on the Sith homeworld of Korriban, and after a long and costly war with their former Jedi brothers and sisters, about how these dark Jedi made the Sith species subservient to them, and how they became the first Dark Lords of the Sith. Disney wants their cake and to eat it too when it comes to the EU. But the problem is, while they are wanting to disregard major parts of the EU or bastardize it until it's their own perverted version, this leaves fans with an incomplete and often empty-feeling universe. Then finally, there's an EU-related leak I want to cover that really fucking bothered me. Apparently, Palpatine's Star Destroyers now have Death Star guns. As if their total perversion of EU lore wasn't enough, they completely have trivialized and made pointless the Death Stars. Once again, this is a consequence of Disney either childishly misinterpreting EU lore, because make no mistake, a lot of the shit here is ripped directly from the EU, or fully realizing that the EU wasn't this dumb, but going off with their bastardized version anyways. I can't tell what is worse, to be perfectly honest. Once again, I must feel I have to defend the EU's legacy here. Because when people go to the theaters and see this absolute dumb shit for themselves, assuming this is all true, there's going to be a huge storm of ridicule and hatred. One that topped the response to The Last Jedi, and rightfully so. However, the Disney Star Wars defenders, in all their moronic glory, will no doubt defend this horse shit by saying that a lot of these things originated in the EU. Don't believe me? They did it in The Last Jedi. Even Rian Johnson, the uninspired motherfucking hack that he is, had the nerve to show a picture of him reading an EU novel where it showed that force projection was a real thing. The funny thing is, I don't remember a Jedi or Sith dying and vaporating into thin air once they were done doing this. And so I'm determined not to let these fucks try to ruin the reputation of the EU. So in the EU, Palpatine does outfit his single Super Star Destroyer with a miniaturized version of the Death Star's gun. This gun is nowhere near the destructive capability of the original gun, but is far more efficient and deadly against ships, and I suppose could damage a planet's surface if Palpatine wanted to. Palpatine didn't just outfit every single fucking Star Destroyer with Death Star guns, because that would be fucking stupid and would absolutely trivialize how expensive and costly a Death Star gun would be, and would render the Death Stars as worthless, as this whole time you could have just put on these bad boys onto any ship with the gun's full destructive capabilities. Then last, but certainly not fucking least, these pieces of shit have the fucking gall to include at the end of the movie a scene with Rey going to Tatooine and visiting Luke's old homestead. Apparently the new owners notice this and go out to ask her name. Rey looks at them and, I shit you fucking not, responds with, "I'm Rey Skywalker." And then the movie goes to credits. What in the absolute hell is this horseshit? No, fuck you, Rey, you absolute vapid and empty placeholder for where a character should be. You do not get to claim the Skywalker legacy. You know who is part of the Skywalker legacy? Anakin Skywalker, Luke Skywalker, Mara Jade Skywalker, Han Solo, Leia Organa, Jaina Solo, Ben Skywalker, Jason Solo, Anakin Solo, and all of their descendants. If this leak is true, it is the final insult and nail in the coffin to Disney Star Wars as a whole. A YouTuber I enjoy and watch a lot by the name of Victor Van Doomcock, shout out to him, I'll provide a link to his channel in case some of you haven't seen his work before, repeatedly uses the phrase, "without respect, we reject." And this phrase works doubly so for the EU fans such as myself, and whenever they disrespect the EU's lore. This perverse experiment with Disney will hopefully end with the Rise of Skywalker. And in the words of old Walder,
well, let's get ready. The wine will flow red, and the music will play loud, and we'll put this mess behind us.